short of a quorum, which is okay. We can wait to approve
We don't know
the
who's online
agenda.
though.
Oh, that's true.
We have a quorum, I bet you.
Yep, we'll wait to approve the agenda until we double check on that. Let's run through roll call real fast. Let's start, who wants to start? Claudia, you want to start us off today?
I have that same screensaver on my computer.
Claudia Fugly, MNCCD.
Heidi Meyer, Minnesota CCD.
Richard Rowan, AARP.
Patsy Murphy, Precinct C.
David Fenley, committee chair.
Darrell Paulsen, Vice Chair, and I represent Region F, I believe,
Patty Thorson,
for
Trellis.
District.
Jeff Danes, Precinct D.
Carrie Sheldon, Precinct G.
Awesome, and I don't see anybody joining us online yet. Hopefully they do.
So then we can,
We'll wait.
what we can do is just pass the minutes
Do we
and
want-
then when they come online.
We will wait, yep, we will wait
Oh, wait.
until we get
Do we
an
wait
extra
for
person
Andy
to.
to come
Hold
to
on
the
one second,
table
y'all.
to
He'll come around. All right, let's dive right into, so we have a jam-packed agenda. I'm gonna try to keep things tight, so I want to implore committee members, wait for recognition from the chair before speaking. And I do apologize in advance if there are questions that do not get asked. We can maybe take those offline. So if I cut it off before the discussion is over, I am sorry, but we have a lot of stuff to discuss today. That being said, do we have Christina Morrison and Jenny Ackerson ready to come and chat with us about Blue Line project update? Yes, please.
We're not voting on,
Hold on one.
Enough quorum.
oh, okay.
Nope,
thank you.
nope.
Now I understand.
No, we'll come back to that. But yes, Christina, Jenny, welcome back. It's been, my sense of time is completely off, but about a year, right? Since y'all have been here, maybe less. I'm sure you'll tell us,
Yes, we will.
but dive right in. Hello, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. I'm Christina Morrison. This is my colleague, Jenny Ackerson. We're from Metro Transit Engineering and Facilities, and we're here to give an update and seek some feedback on our Lake Street Midtown Station renovation. This photo, I'll just add the cover photo here. This is the interior of the South Tower at Lake Street Station, looking towards the elevator. And the walls of the station have recently had a new wallpaper, kind of an art design wallpaper applied that helps us deter graffiti on those previously blank canvas walls. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So in May 2022, actually, we were here to introduce this project, and then we returned last March, so it's been quite a few months. But as a recap, the station is approaching 20 years in service. We have a redesign scope that includes both towers on the north and south side of Lake Street. That also includes stairs, escalators, elevators, and everything on top of the platform, so shelters, the overhead canopy, windscreens, amenities, basically everything. And then our goals for this project include improving accessibility. We know that the grade-separated station here is a challenge for reliability and high-quality accessibility. We also want to improve our customer experience, and we want to make it more maintainable, more easily maintained. So this photo here is a photo of the, is a photo approaching the platform from the stairs or escalator in the upstairs vestibule. You can see a lot of the glass that's original to the station design. Next slide, please. So today we're wrapping up the planning stage for the project, which included developing the project purpose and need, doing the concept design, meeting with stakeholders like you all and internal staff, and then really digging further into our ramp concept designs. You may recall that we have a pedestrian ramp that we'd like to add to the station to provide another form of vertical access. We are transitioning now into our formal design process. We are going to council next week to encumber a design contract. And with that, we will be beginning public input on the design And we expect that we'll be returning to this group in the future with additional updates and seeking feedback. And then I'll just note that construction for this station is slated for the 2026 timeframe. Next slide, please.
Can I just say one thing? Can she speak up a little with the mask?
Yes, yeah,
Oh,
sure.
sure. Yeah, I'm going to scoot in.
Because she had the thicker one and I'm losing.
Yeah, I'm going to scoot in a little bit. Does that help?
Perfect. That's
Okay,
much better.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So today we are looking to seek your advisory input on the proposed design elements of this pedestrian ramp, which includes a landform ramp, a center ramp, and a no-build option, and we'll explain what those things mean. And then today the station is accessible through these two vertical towers on the north and south side of Lake Street. Each building includes an elevator, an escalator, and a staircase. Two of those elements are shown on this slide, so this is showing that escalator and staircase on the south side station. From our concept design, we have proposed to widen the stairs by removing the escalator and to kind of turn the stairs around so that they face Lake Street rather than facing away from Lake Street. We would also retain an elevator on each side of the street and potentially shift those elevators closer to Lake Street. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it over to Jenny to talk more about the ramps.
Hi, thank you so much for welcoming us back. So I'm going to recap the landform ramp, which is the name of the first ramp design that we showed you earlier this year, came out of our concept design work. So the image on the left is of a rendering of how this landform ramp would fit next to the station, to the side of the tracks, and would be kind of part of the existing market plaza that's there today. And then the image on the right is sort of a bird's eye view of kind of a concept scale of how big this could be, what shape it would take. So you would kind of rise on longer switchbacks and then need to cross the tracks before you reach the platform. And it could include some landscaping and seating. So this was the first concept design ramp that we had shown to TAAC previously. Next slide, please. So we wanted to reiterate what we've heard from you in the past about this ramp, as well as some of our staff feedback. So generally speaking, people are supportive of adding a ramp to this station in the renovation project. But understanding that ramps are not as useful for everyone. Some people would still prefer to use an elevator to access the platform in street level, just because of how long the ramp would need to be to reach the platform level. But the ramp itself, we heard pretty clearly, is not a substitute for not quickly repairing an elevator if it is out of service. So it is considered a supplement and not a replacement. We've also heard that any ramp should stay free and clear. So if it's whether that means covering it or heating the pavement or just making sure that it's well maintained so people can use it year round. The landform ramp was presented to have good connectivity, so to fit well with accessing from Lake Street, from the adjacent trail next to the plaza as well. However, all of this feedback is countered by just the inherent risk that's associated with adding a new track crossing at the station that does not exist today. We have track crossings at most light rail stations across our system, but this is kind of a unique elevated case that we have not had before. Next slide, please. And the main case study or reference point for what this landform ramp could look like exists in Minneapolis along the Mississippi River. This is at Waterworks Pavilion, part of Mill Ruins Park. It's adjacent to Awamni, if you're familiar with that. And this ramp has some seating and landscaping folded into it. And this is just one large image of that ramp. And then the inset in the upper right is just another view with people sitting on it and going up and down the ramp and stairs as well. We have one more image on the next slide as well. These are views of what it would be like to use the ramp. So you can see how the seating kind of interacts with the space, where the landscaping folds, how those turns might look as well. So we found that when Christina and I did a site visit to this ramp itself, that it was really illuminating to see what the actual vantage points were like and how it interacts with the potential seating. And we certainly welcome the input from the committee today on if you've used this particular ramp or one similar to it. So we'll open that up for discussion at the close of the presentation. Next slide, please. So the new content we are presenting today is what we're calling the center ramp. And this was really created due to the concerns with adding a new track crossing. So we commissioned a geometric feasibility study to determine whether it was possible to put a ramp in between the light rail tracks bridge as they are today, meeting the platform without a track crossing. So this first diagram is a cross-section of what this potential center ramp could look like. So you can see that it would have multiple switchbacks to be able to rise up to the platform level, and it would be held up by a center column as well. The lower portions of this ramp on the diagram are 8 feet wide, but it is required to narrow to 6 feet at the top in order to get in between the two bridge structures itself. And we understand that that is considered a minimally viable pinch point, right? 6 feet is, not everyone is able to pass or have two-way traffic with 6 feet width. The image on the right here is of the light rail station area today. So this is behind the South Tower. You can see where the trail crosses in today, where we have a traction power station, and then you can really get a feel for the bridge constraints of how there's a pretty narrow opening, there's some grade changes, there's a lot of kind of bridge structure already in place that make trying to fit a ramp between this track a bit difficult. Next slide, please. And this is one more diagram of what shape this center ramp could take. Really, we understand that this diagram is pretty technical, but the takeaway here is just to see that it would switch back on top of itself a couple times and in order to reach the platform. And let me see here. Oh, we have a couple more images to show you as well. So next slide, please. So the primary case study for this ramp is also along the Mississippi River. This is at the Hennepin Avenue Bridge downtown, where you can meet the parkway. This is a spiral switchback ramp supported by center columns, so pretty similar to what we had just showed you in the diagram, but this ramp has a few qualities that are a bit different compared to what could potentially fit at our station. This one's a bit, more in an open space, so when you're referencing this ramp, we just want to make sure you understand that the proposed center ramp for Lake Street Midtown Station would still need to be constrained by a bridge on both sides of this, so it wouldn't have as much daylighting, and there would be another layer of switchback on top of this due to the proposed slopes and rise necessary. Next slide, please. Also on our site visit, we found it helpful to take photos of what the vantage points of using this ramp would be. So these are two images of what approaching the ramp feels like. On the left, you can see what the entrance to the ramp would be. So you can see the run right in front of you. You could see a little bit of the kind of next levels atop of you, but you're really not seeing what's around the corner. And then the image on the right is, again, kind of what it is like to be in the middle of the ramp here, so you can see how the rounded corners might interact with your ability to access the ramp. Also of note, this ramp is a bit wider and a bit taller than what constraints would be able to fit at Lake Street Midtown Station. So as noted again, we do welcome committee members to share their experiences using this ramp or other similar ramps in the comments and discussion portion. Next slide, please. So we have circulated this ramp design with staff so far, and of course, welcoming TAAC feedback today on this, but some of the major points that we've heard thus far include, this ramp was designed to not require a track crossing, and it does meet that requirement. It does include a proposed minimum width of 6 feet at the top, 6 feet wide, and 8 feet at the bottom, and we understand that that is just inherently a challenge and pinch point that, if we were to go with this design, would be inherent to it. It does pose new safety concerns. We've heard from people that the lack of visibility, with it being kind of tucked between the bridges and being pretty far set back from Lake Street, would make it feel a bit uncomfortable with poor or hard to manage sightlines. And then also just the customer experience perspective. We've heard that people feel that it'd be too hidden or too far away. This would be further set back than where the elevator is today. It feels confined, or it seems like it would be uninviting in comparison to the landform ramp. And I am going to pass it back to Christina.
Thanks, Jenny. We'll go to the next slide, please. So in addition to the 2 ramp options, we're also assuming there's an option that would be essentially a no-build, and not including the ramp in the new scope. And that would be because of if there are sufficient concerns or some insurmountable sort of issues with the 2 ramp designs. We also want to be transparent that there could be a no-build. So one of the things we have been discussing is, are 2 elevators at Lake Street sufficient? So 1 on each side of Lake Street. We think that this group might have feedback on that. We also recognize that our current situation at Lake Street has been one sort of fraught with outages. Those elevators are at the end of their 20-year lifespan, and we have significant issues with keeping those in service today. So just putting this out there is sort of, there is always another option, which is that it would not be included in the scope. Next slide, please. So today, as Jenny mentioned, we're going to be looking to you all for some feedback on if these options add or detract from accessibility at the station, with the options being the landform ramp, the center ramp, or no ramp. And then I'll just, if we can go to the next slide, please. I'll just talk a little bit about the ramp decision. So how we're moving forward with making a decision with this, the ramp concepts, is that we're reviewing the concepts with stakeholders, and that includes obviously this group. It includes comparing them to our project goals, getting staff feedback from different departments at Metro Transit. It includes a safety analysis based on hazards that each design present and possible mitigations. And then, as Jenny mentioned, there's a more of a technical feasibility as far as the constraints of things like the bridge. From there, we will share input from all stakeholders to our project management team within engineering and facilities, who will ultimately help us make the final recommendation on the ramp or no ramp. And then if there are impacts to the adjacent parkland at Market Square, there is an additional step with the Federal Transit Administration for their approval to proceed with those parkland impacts. So with that, I think I have one more slide. Next slide, please. Then we'll open it up for discussion. So just to reiterate, we're transitioning into our formal design process. We feel like this is a good time to kind of get some direction on this very important element. Yeah, and I guess with that, I'll open it up for, or turn it back to Chair Fenley. Thank you.
Thank you both very much for joining us and for engaging us so much on just this one specific. Yes, Sam, you're here, yay. Do you have?
Apologize that I was late.
It's okay, do you have a question? Do you have a question about the ramp, Sam?
I have a question about the elevators. May I ask that?
Please, yes, fire away.
So I heard you, and I apologize if I missed it, early on saying that the ramps were not necessarily a substitute for the elevators, but you also stated the elevators were kind of at the end of their life cycle. And I again apologize if I missed it, but is there anything that will is there an idea of updating those elevators, i.e., or getting new elevators for the place of those elevators? And that would be my question. Thank you.
Yes, Chair Fenley, committee members, thanks, that's a good clarification. So this renovation would include new elevators to replace the original Blue Line elevators that were installed circa 2004. And in addition to that, we're looking at the ramp as an additional piece.
Thank you.
Darrell, go ahead.
Yes, thank you both for being here today. It's, this project is much needed, and I'm glad we're looking at it. The things that I see, if you look at the Hennepin Bridge ramp project, you can see that clearly is, it's probably 8 foot to 10 feet, right? How many feet is that?
I believe it's 10 feet.
Right. So, when you're looking at maintenance vehicles and things like that, and vehicles that plow that or clear that in the wintertime, look at the size of those vehicles that are going down there. So if you're looking at it from 6 foot to 10 feet, let's go somewhere in the middle. Let's stay with 8 feet, because most city equipment and most snow equipment can be cleared on an 8-foot path and not a 6-foot path. We don't need 10 feet necessarily either. The other concern I have is that unless you cover it and let's not talk about heated pavement, okay? Because I think that's a pipe dream. I mean, I know it works well in small spaces and small areas, but it's not feasible for big outdoor projects, and especially with our maintenance crews and our old maintenance equipment. I just feel that heated pavement, we're not gonna get our money's worth on that, but we will get our money's worth on an awning or a covering. And I will tell you, amazingly, how it works for me personally. I have a ramp that was exposed probably for about 3 years of my residential property where I sit. Well, the first winter was fine. The plow guy was trying to figure it out, and we had to get 3 new plow guys the first year. And then the second year, the plow guy says, "I'm gonna do better this year. I'm gonna do better for you." I said, "Well, guess what? I'm gonna put an awning there so that at least I have the ability to go from a clear spot of my apartment all the way to a clear spot of my driveway without having to worry about the snow and clearance." So I'm a big fan of covering any type of walking path. I did see what was that, the platform, or what do you call that, the platform path where there's those tiered levels. I'm just really concerned that if you don't figure out a way to cover it or keep it covered and keep it warm, then a lot of that snow and a lot of that stuff that comes in during fall time, before we get the heavy winter, it's just gonna clutter that space up, and you're gonna go from 10 feet down to 8 feet very quickly just by the debris and the stuff that lands there. So to cover it it makes it a little bit warmer because we don't have the wind from the top, and we might be able to cover the side a little bit to keep the snow from coming in. But I just urge, it's cheaper than the heated pavement, and I don't think the heated pavement, we're gonna get our money's worth in a climate area like Minnesota.
Thank you, Darrell. So I have one quick, so it's my understanding that it's width of ramp versus crossing a track. That's kind of what we're at here. So you're constrained if you don't cross the tracks. You're not if you don't. Okay, so we have 2 different designs. Perfect, just for my understanding. Any other? Yes, Heidi, go ahead.
My question is that when I look at this, you're not thinking about people, well, wheelchairs and walkers, and there's multiple different types of disabilities that may think, wow, this is a workout. Or the processing part, because I don't want to end up getting lost trying to get to the train because you made this giant maze and the maze goes like, a bunch of different ways. And all I want to do is go to that train to get to St. Paul or to get to that location. I don't want it so complicated that you can't. And I was thinking about what Darrell was saying, because I said the same thing earlier, but I had to be patient and wait. Because I'm worried about it, because when I have to walk up to South Robert Street, I'm always dealing on the side of the roads, all the leaves, all the branches, all the stuff that gets left behind, because I don't know how you're going to shovel it, and I'm never going to be able to drive at all. And I've seen every single scenario that's bad and good. So if you ever want to talk about that, I can tell you. But I'm just concerned about some people with processing getting lost, they know there's a train there. They know they've been told that if they can understand when they talk to Metro Transit, and then do what you ask. So don't make it so complicated that I can't even get out of my house and do what I need to do. Thank you.
Any other members? Are you looking for like an official recommendation between the three options?
Oh, I have one more thing.
Hold on just 1 second, just 1 second.
I think it can be a collection of comments because
Okay.
in some cases, comments apply to both designs. But yeah, if people are inclined towards one or the other, that's okay
We
too.
don't have to do anything super official, but.
Yeah, we don't have to do nothing official, but I would recommend, let's explore both options as long as they can be covered and also they can be, we can be guaranteed that they'll be free of debris and elements that are not supposed to be there during the hours of operation.
Yes, Heidi.
And my other thing is, when I saw those stairs, and we talked about this before, escalators can be really good or they can be really bad. It just depends on how. Because when I went to the stadium for the first time, the football stadium, I ended up taking the elevator, but for the handicap, I had to figure out, and I had to ask 3 times just to get to the handicap elevator. Because I looked up and I'm going,
Well, first of
oh,
all,
that's
you
a
said
little
handicap elevator, they
scary.
didn't
That's
know
a
where that
little
was.
scary to go use that escalator to go to the very top to go to my concert. And I was thinking if you take away the escalator and just do stairs, certain disabilities can't do it, or they're not gonna maintain it, so it's gonna be dangerous to use, because I don't wanna slip and fall. I want options, but I don't want it so dangerous to the point where I can't process how to get where I need to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy, and then I'll come to you, Richard.
I don't know that we've explicitly said this, and I want the committee to absolutely correct me if I'm differing from your opinions on this, but the feedback I've gotten from the disability community has all said some version of 2 elevators is not sufficient to answer that question. And I get their end of life
That would make
now,
sense.
but even when they weren't, and it's not just Lake Street, right? I mean, if you look at the West Bank and the experience there, it's not at all infrequent and hasn't been for both of those elevators to be out of commission at the same time, rendering the station totally inaccessible. So I believe that the committee, based on previous conversations and certainly based on the feedback I've received within the disability community, would say that no, 2 elevators is not sufficient. Now, whether it's possible to put a third one in, and whether that changes the question of ramp versus no ramp, I think would be an interesting thing to talk about. But 2 elevators by itself is not sufficient, I don't think.
Yeah, and Andy, I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I believe I remember that conversation, and I believe if Sam remembers it as well, I believe Sam also talked about it as well. I believe we know that the 2 elevators aren't sufficient. We also know that you guys have issues with heating and stuff like that around the intimate weather times. So if we're going to allow for 2 elevators or 3 elevators or do some kind of bridge ramp design, we're gonna have to improve heating and lighting very clearly in our system. And that's been my goal for the last 10 years I've been on this committee, is to improve heating and lighting for our system all the way through.
Thank you, Darrell. Richard?
I was gonna raise the same issue about elevators that Andy raised.
Okay, so we have a few minutes left for this discussion. I want to ask a specific question to TAAC members. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, just to kind of really get at the crux here. So would you prefer a ramp that's wider, has more, essentially space to be built, or no track crossing? That's kind of the main question here, yes, if we boiled it down. Because we definitely want a ramp there.
Chair, I'm a little perplexed by this, because I don't, I know in my heart what I think is easier for Ken and maybe Sam, but I don't live that lifestyle. So I mean, for me, I want a wider path, because then I can maneuver anything that might be on the edge, like ice, like stuff that might have, you know, we might not have been able to clean out from the night before. I mean, but I mean, I definitely want to make sure that the people that have visual impairments and sight impairments, they get the first crack at how this looks, because they're the ones that are gonna have to navigate it, whether there's good lighting or not.
Thank you, Darrell. Heidi, last question, and then
Well,
we will.
and what Darrell said, I also want the people like me who have to process this
Right.
information to be there too. Because if I can't get to the station and I'm confused and you're telling
Right.
me it's simple, then it doesn't work. Because certain lighting is really helpful to figure out if I made a mistake or not, and certain colors and shapes and stuff. I don't know how this is gonna be built, but it's gotta be built with something that I can attach my brain to, and then it can do what you asked me to do. If you ask me to go to the train, you know, and it's like a little learning test, you know? And then I can tell you it sucked because of the lighting, or I can tell you, too many homeless people were getting in the way, you know, because I don't know if this is gonna be like a place where people gather and take up space. So me and Darrell or any of my friends here can't come with me, you know, I don't know how it's gonna be set up. I just want to get to the train and be able to do it. I don't want it so complicated that none of this gets off the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. So any committee members that have not asked a question or raised a concern, want to talk?
And then you can go
Go
back
ahead.
on.
I guess I would like to see the option. If the elevators did break down, I would want another way
Yep.
to get somewhere, because I've been in the situation where both elevators have been down and have not been able to get anywhere. So we need to have an option.
What happens when that happens? When you're not able to get anywhere? They tell you to wait? Do they come hang out and wait with you, or what? What happens?
I had two guys help me down steps.
Interesting.
And I don't like the U of M. They didn't make that very well.
Sounds dangerous.
Yeah, especially if they would have dropped her, right?
All right. Did you have any other questions for us or things you want to discuss with us? Otherwise, thank you very much for coming. If members have further comments, they can share them with us, or
If you were looking for a more robust recommendation, I guess what I heard from the committee was that we recommend that 2 elevators is not sufficient. And then my recommendation would be that we pursue both options with some kind of covering element and some kind of
Escalator.
addressing the heating and lighting elements as well for safety and security.
thank you, Darrell.
Options for if you can't take the stairs.
That was not a formal motion, but I can make it if we need to, because I really want to see this committee make an impact on this project. Because if we make an impact today, on this project today, our impact's going to last for the next 20 years, right? Hopefully, right? If we use the right materials, we're gonna get another 20 years out of it, right? So, that's why it's important to decide, if you want something from us directly, you have to tell us, and then we'll try to make it happen.
All right, last comment, Patsy, take it away.
Sorry.
When it comes to the center ramp, I would see, for myself at least, quite a concern, as you had in here, about the safety concerns of, yes, the darkness, the possibility of people or things being there that could be an issue for myself. I would not feel comfortable being in a darkened area like that where, yes, there could be, especially in that area, people that are just hiding out in sides and we cover it, then they'll even have more reason to possibly make home there. So I think also this longer, your land one, nice, straight, is going to be more easier for numerous people, whether that be in a wheelchair, or whether that be somebody trying to follow processing myself. If I have a straight line, I can do it, but to try to go round and round and round. So I would say your first one there, not the center ramp, but the first one.
Thank you. Thank you for your feedback, TAAC members, and thank you for bringing this to us. We appreciate it.
It's great.
Thank you so much.
Right. Are Kelly and Gwen in the room?
They are.
Yay.
They've been in
All right, 4 minutes ahead of time. Thank you both for joining us.
Chair, can we go back and make a motion to approve our minutes?
So we'll do it after this.
All right,
Yeah, I want to fly through some agenda items, but thank you for reminding me that,
all right.
because we now
I
have a
was going
quorum.
to check with that first, and can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Kelly Morrell. I'm a Senior Project Administrator in Transit Information at Metro Transit. I use she, her pronouns, and you feel free to call me Kelly. I'm filling in today for Laura Matson, manager of our business systems. Unfortunately, she is out sick today. I'm joined by my colleague, Gwen Riak, who is our outgoing intern and led the majority of this project. The first photo on this slide, sorry, can you go back one just so I can describe it, is more of a decorative photo of a few individuals riding a bus on a Metro Transit bus. Next slide. So today, we're here to share the preliminary findings of our evaluation of Metro Transit's automated onboard announcement system. I'll provide some background on why we undertook this evaluation, along with a brief overview of how that system works. Gwen is going to go through the evaluation itself, the goals we set for it, the methodologies we used, the results, and most importantly, we're looking for your guidance on how to prioritize next steps as we commit to improving this vital source of customer information. I will ask that you hold your questions to the end, if that's all right with all of you. Next slide. So as some of you may recall, in 2021, Metro Transit's Marketing and Transit Information Division worked with members of this committee and then other recruited members of the disability community to identify ways in which our division could do better when it came to serving customers with disabilities and ensuring they're represented, there we go, in our educational and promotional materials. Members identified improving the reliability and quality of bus onboard announcements as the second highest priority in that project for the division. So our first step in the journey was making improvements was this evaluation. We wanted to understand how the announcements work now and then determine the scale of reported problems. Next slide. So before we talk about the evaluation methodologies and results, I'm just going to provide a brief overview of how the announcement system works and how it's configured. All Metro Transit buses are equipped to play automated announcements. These announcements are configured to comply with the ADA, which requires transit agencies to announce transfer points, major intersections, destination points, and intervals along a route sufficient to enable visually impaired riders to know where they are. Beyond those required announcements, we also have the all-important stop requested, we're all familiar with, that plays when a customer pulls the cord or presses the button to indicate that they need to get off the bus at the next stop. And finally, we have public service, courtesy, and safety messages that either play at scheduled intervals or at the bus operator's discretion. Next slide. More than 100,000 automated announcements play on Metro Transit system every day. And based on what we learned through this evaluation process about all the components that go into making an announcement, we've determined that every single one of those 100,000 announcements is a tiny miracle. This slide lists most of the things that need to be working perfectly for an automated announcement to play the correct content at the correct time in the correct place. So you announce data,
Both the audio files and the text of what has to be said and the route files need to be loaded onto every bus, which means that the Wi-Fi in the garage had to be working properly and the bus was in the garage long enough for it to download those very large files. We have to make sure the geographic zones for each announcement were calibrated correctly. We have to ensure that the bus global positioning system, or GPS, and the onboard speakers are working correctly, and that the operator hasn't disabled the automated announcements, which through our engagement with operators, we discovered there's a variety of reasons why they choose to do that. Next slide. So I'm going to now turn it over to Gwen to discuss our evaluation.
So, hi, I'm Gwen Riak. I use she, her pronouns, and as Kelly mentioned, I am the intern in transit information. Our overall goals for our evaluation, most of all, just to evaluate the performance, to figure out how well these announcements are working on buses. So we wanted to establish a baseline and as well determine any causes for announcements not working as well as expected, both things that may happen repeatedly or even one-off scenarios that riders are experiencing. We also wanted to identify opportunities to improve this performance and then come to you and identify follow-up questions to ask you and use that to guide our improvements. Next slide, please. So these are the 4 methods of evaluation that we used during the course of this project. We used an onboard audit. We conducted data analysis. We also had a customer contact review and sought bus operator feedback in order to inform our project. Next slide, please. When I joined on in June 2023, I began an onboard audit program, how we conducted this is with staff writing buses with iPads. Those staff either came from us, Transit Information, or from the Transit Information Center representatives. And while we were on the buses, we logged announcement locations. We logged if the announcement had played completely and any other issues that we encountered during our ride. Overall, we completed 31 full trip audits across 25 different routes in our system. At first, we were selecting routes for geographic coverage. Our pilot routes were the A, C, and D lines, as well as the Route 10. And we realized that those were very Minneapolis or west side of the Twin Cities centric. And so we moved into St. Paul and tried to ride routes that were going in and out of downtown St. Paul. And as well, we wanted to find a diversity between downtown and more suburban routes in order to figure out if there was any difference in announcement success in those 2 different areas. After that, we selected routes to follow up on issues that we were experiencing, either through the audit or through our other methods of evaluations, so that we could single out pain points that riders were experiencing and see if they were consistent issues. Overall, we found that 92.8% of planned announcements played when expected, and the most significant causes of performance issues were route changes and detours. Yep. Next slide, please. Oh, excuse me, can you go back one? This map on the right, I created to show the geographic coverage of our audit. The red lines indicate routes that we audited in both directions, either northbound, southbound, or eastbound, westbound. And the purple routes indicate areas or routes in which we only audited one direction. It extends west towards Hopkins, north into Fridley, south into Inver Grove Heights, and east into Maplewood. Thank you. Next slide. We also conducted a heavy amount of data analysis. This was led by our team's data scientist, Michael Kolshaw-Moore. So a little bit of background on that is that all played announcements are logged into a database that we are able to access. However, in attempting to do the analysis, We identified significant data quality issues and gaps in the data, and we're working with the vendor right now to address these errors in order to successfully complete our data analysis strategies in the future. One thing we were able to find is that 5% of announcements were interrupted by the stop requested.
That's okay.
And as well, performance appears to vary depending on the route, and routes with significant detours, as the audit also found, had the most missing announcements. Next slide, please. During our project, we also worked with our customer relations department in order to conduct a customer contact review. So I went through all 48 complaints about onboard announcements that had been filed between January 1st, 2018 and August 18th, 2023. That number of 48 was significantly less than we expected, but the information that we received from them was still very valuable. The numbers on the right represent the breakdown of what these complaints were specifically about relating to announcements. So 33% of complaints were about no announcements during an entire trip. 23 were about incorrect content being said during the announcement. 10% were mispronunciation of streets, towns, or other landmarks. 10% represented announcements that were played too late. So a customer reporting that an announcement played after they'd already passed the stop and they weren't able to signal stop requested in time. 10% were landmark suggestions, different places around the Twin Cities that they would like us to announce to help with accessibility and knowing when they should get off of the bus at the right stop, or landmarks that we were announcing and had been removed from that area and we should take out of the announcement. 6% were individual announcements missed. So just a customer saying, like, I was riding a bus and I wanted to listen for one announcement and it didn't play. So that differs from the 33% number, which is for the entire trip, no announcements playing. And then 4% were reports of the volume of announcements being too high and, as a result, hard to understand. Next slide, please. These are some examples of complaints that we received, and I thought represented the kind of overall theme of these complaints very well. The first reads, quote, "I'm blind and I've noticed that the announcements haven't been playing on the Route 23 between 4th Ave and Nicollet since the detour ended. It's just quiet and the drivers don't say anything either. This has been happening on every bus I've been on, going in both directions," end quote. That one to me represented the no announcements playing during the full trip, which was our highest represented category. The next reads, quote, "Please check 2 announcements on Route 25L heading west from downtown. As the bus approaches Willow Street, the announcement sounds like Will Street. After the bus turns, the announcement is about Hennepin access, but this occurs after the bus is past Hennepin." So that complaint spoke to both incorrect content and announcements being played too late. And the final one reads, quote, "On the northbound A-line bus, it will announce the Snelling and Como station stop right after the bus leaves the Como stop. I have never heard the announcement before it reaches the stop," end quote. That as well spoke to announcements playing too late and a customer not being able to get off at the right stop. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Did we lose them?
Somebody wake up Jason.
Thank you. Our last evaluation method was a bus operator feedback. On one afternoon, Kelly, Laura Matson, and I took a couple hours to set up in the North Loop Garage common room and just talk to any operators that were passing by during their time between trips or as they were coming in or leaving their shifts. And it provided really valuable feedback and information to us just on the actual operation of these announcements rather than the data behind them. All operators that we talked to provided examples of announcements not working properly. It seemed like everyone had one example or one situation that they had experienced where their announcements hadn't been working, and either they didn't know what to do or they made those announcements manually. We confirmed that operators are instructed to make announcements themselves if automated announcements don't work. And we also confirmed that operators have and know that they have multiple channels to report these issues with announcements so that staff can address. Next slide, please. That picture was Kelly and I talking to an operator in the North Loop garage.
Thank you. So what conclusions did we reach? I'm unfortunate to say that not many that we could state with any sort of confidence or definitiveness. We feel confident about the results of the onboard audit because you're able to witness that performance in real time, but really the data quality issues make it impossible for us to make any definitive statements about the announcement performance system-wide at this time. And the bit of data that we were able to sort of glean at these very coarse scale, we could basically look overall, how many announcements for a route are planned, how many of those played. And we saw, overall, we could say from that data analysis, 95% played correctly. But there are a few routes that account for very low percentages of played announcements. And bus riding and transit riding is such an individual experience. So if that's your daily route, that 95% doesn't make any sense to you. So that's why we're not here to state any sort of system-wide performance, because we couldn't possibly say that. So that doesn't mean that we give up. Metro Transit is committed to improving announcement accuracy and reliability. In short term, that means we will continue to conduct onboard audits and work to resolve the data quality issues so that we can start to make better understanding of kind of what's going on our system. We have added more information to our new operator training that highlights the importance of making announcements when the annunciators aren't working. And that's giving new operators the why behind the rule, which we have found is very helpful. And then finally, we'd really like to maintain an ongoing engagement with this committee and transit riders who rely on audio information so you can help us prioritize announcement improvements in the future. Next slide, please. So as we conclude today, we have these 3 questions for you, not necessarily to be answered in this moment, but as a basis for ongoing engagement. 1, what should Metro Transit prioritize to improve onboard announcements? What is your expectation for reliability and accuracy? We've got a baseline, but we want to know what you expect us to aim for. And then finally, what's the best way for us to continue to get your feedback, and how can we connect with this broader community of transit riders who rely on audio information? That concludes our presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, for your time today. We'll happily answer any questions you have, but I will turn it back to the chair.
Thank you both very much, Gwen and Laura. That was a really good presentation. Every time I had a question, the next slide answered it. So that means it's a good presentation. I have a couple questions, then I'll pass it to my committee members. Is the current system, the way that it's set up, can it promptly address concerns when they're brought up, like so that one blind user, that one blind rider was like, there's no announcement at all. Is it fixed in a timely fashion, or is that something that takes a long time to download data, reprogram stuff?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. When we get them, they go to the staff that can fix it.
Okay.
But it really depends on when is the bus going to get back to the garage in time to download that new file, and is it going to stay in the bus long enough to actually get that. So I can't give you any definitive answers. We know that staff address it as promptly as they can. The technology may not be there to get it out as quickly as we'd like.
Yeah, I kind of got that gist from here. It's like,
Yeah.
we can only work with the data or the system that we have.
Yeah.
I'll go to.
I was just going to.
Go ahead. Follow up.
So we looking at, is that something that gets fixed, then are we saying in a day, or take a week, or could take a month?
When the garage decides to get to it.
Yes.
Yes, again, I think there's one thing that I will just share personally that I learned through this project, I've been at Metro Transit for 10 years, and this was such an eye-opening experience we think a lot about our facilities and our buses. We don't talk a lot about the technology that makes all this information work. A lot of it hasn't been able to be updated because of lack of funding, or just haven't been able to prioritize it over other things, because there are so many priorities and all are important. So It's hard to say, like, why can't we spend more money on better GPS units or better computers on the buses? But that's really what it comes down to.
I feel like there's a space for AI here, but
Just throw out that buzzword.
Sam,
You guys are using it a little bit, but we'll see.
Sam, do you have a question online?
Yes,
Fire
actually,
away.
a couple.
Yep, go ahead.
So first of all, well, a comment. I would encourage you to set the bar high because not everyone has an iPhone who is blind and or visually impaired. Also, by the time the bus announces the late passing of where they wanted to get off, which I've been on the bus when it's done that, who knows where that bus will stop and what the terrain will be for that person. So it may stop somewhere where there's some construction on the sidewalk, or it may make it really difficult for that person to cross the street if it's much busier to go back. And secondly, my question also would be, is there any incentive or disciplinary action if the driver, because I heard you say that the drivers there was a comment of that they didn't know what to do when their announcement was broken, although you also said they are trained to know the proper channels to get things fixed or how to report them. So unless I heard incorrectly, what is the action that you have for if the driver does not report things and continues to not, announce anything? Because I feel like there could be an incentive here to reward them if they do a really great job, or if that's not working, take the other approach. Unfortunately, sometimes you need that other approach and the carrot doesn't work. So I'll stop and let you answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chair and members, to answer your initial question about sort of the confusion between drivers trying to fix things and knowing that they have to manually do announcements, we were talking about sort of fixing the technical issue of announcements aren't playing, and so they might try and restart the bus. But they do know that if announcements aren't playing, that they need to do manual announcements. I would like to go back to our training and transportation staff to get an answer to that question, because I don't feel confident I could answer correctly what the disciplinary action might be. Is that acceptable?
I can help with that. So like Kelly, I don't know exactly what the disciplinary action looks like, but I do know that if announcements are turned off or are not playing, it does prompt a message to Transit Control Center staff, who then can forward that on to supervisors. There's no disciplinary action from our side, but the information is available.
Okay, and that's automated?
Yes, if announcements are not playing or
They disabled
they disabled, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sam, did you have a follow-up by chance? I just want to check back in with you. No.
So
Okay,
just to clarify for me, you're saying that the drivers can choose to turn those announcements off?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair and
Yes, go
members, yes, they can. They do it for a lot of different reasons. Some is that it's gargly, so they're trying to repair an issue, a technical issue on their own, and they just turn the announcements off. It also can happen when they're on a detour and the announcements are wrong, and so they're trying to not put out wrong information, so they disable those.
And I would hope that the training would be especially strong for they must announce seriously if they're choosing to turn those off because of those very viable, reasonable reasons, but you have to have a plan B here. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, Heidi, and then I'll come to Darrell.
I was thinking this can be across the whole board because I used to train the buses and stuff, so I've seen it on the platforms where the announcements have failed or miscommunicated, or the screen was broken because it doesn't know how to send information to order to talk. And then on the trains, I've noticed the sounds are, you have a couple of different sounds, you know, so the levels are, you know, you got someone yelling, don't smoke, and that's a totally different sound, you know, and a different pitch than the announcements for the trains that you really want to focus on, because they're not going to listen to you about smoking. But most people listen about the where to get off, so that's, you know, something you need to make sure. It's the same with the buses, because I know the outside bus sometimes announces in the inside, and I have seen it where that machine, you know, when you look behind, here's the driver, and then that little digital board, I've seen it all dots sometimes because it has literally malfunctioned and died. You know, and doesn't, and sometimes you're right, it does interfere right in the middle of something important. And sometimes if you're trying to process it, and seeing is a really good thing to have, but if you can't, some of those clues are kind of gone, and, you know, we trust you to help us, you know, get that. Because I know on the trains I use it a lot when I have to go to a new place, because it's kind of like far apart from each other, and then you get a far apart, and then you get, and you do every stop. It's not like you just pass it and then you got some kind of understanding, you know? So I think this idea can go across the whole board, and you can do some really nice cleaning up, because I reported 2 times on the Central that the billboards, you know, the announcer stuff, it's all screwed up. And to get those people to understand it, you know, to fix it is hard. So I would appreciate your idea, not just for the buses, but the whole system, get a good cleanup and work done. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi.
Is it okay to respond?
Oh, yeah, please do.
Mr. Chair and members, thank you very much for that feedback. And that is why, and I also wanted to respond to the previous members' comments about setting the bar high, because we do know that when these announcements don't work for the people that use them, it's devastating. So we want to set that bar high. Regarding the scope of this project, this is kind of our first time doing this kind of evaluation, so we wanted to set a manageable scope. We absolutely want to evaluate the external announcements. We know that's really important for folks that are getting on the bus, knowing what their route is, and then for the train as well. I will say the train is a completely different technical system.
And just one other thing real quickly, and remember the front of the trains and the size of the trains, wherever advertising is to announce, including the city bus, because I didn't know if he was not in service or not, because the front of the bus had completely went black. And so it lost the announcement. So it's kind of like, instead of verbally saying it, it didn't show me it. So I didn't know if I should get on the bus. And he said, yeah, I'm going downtown. Did you know your front sign is not showing anything? It's dead, it's black. So I didn't know, and he said, thanks, and I don't even know if you reported it or took it in, but if you're talking verbal, then you also have to do written print too to go with those verbals, because they kind of go together.
Absolutely. And I would just, if it's okay to follow up.
Please do, yes.
Please, we know that it is a burden to contact us, but please do, like I said, those 100,000 announcements, and we've told you about our data quality issues, we just don't have like a way to alert ourselves to these problems without operators doing it or customers doing it. And I think that was one thing that we really appreciated from the customer contact review, is like, okay, well, these are like real examples of what's going on, because one, the data kind of disappears after a day, so we can't really do a ton of going back if something was incorrect. And we just don't have like an alert system. So you are our alert system, and we really appreciate it when you take the time to let us know.
So if you can't hear at all, then you can use the visual, and if that's working, that's great. And if you're the other way around, if that's working, you got both ends happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's always our goal. Go ahead.
I will say that due to the scope of our project, the customer contact review was focused on the on-bus audio announcements. However, in my review, I did see, I don't know an exact number, but at least dozens of complaints about the tickers on board showing, or outside the bus showing incorrect information. So it is identified as an issue, but was not included in our synopsis of the contact review. But like the complaints and identification does exist for sure.
Thank you. Any other members have questions, comments? Darrell, go ahead.
Gwen, first of all, thank you for being an intern for Metro Transit, and thank you for everything that you've done in this project. The one thing that I can say is that out of 100,000 messages, maybe we got too many messages on our system. Maybe that's why the gargling in, maybe that's why some of the drivers turn it off in the evenings. Because in the evening time, when I ride the bus in the evening, they turn it off. And the reason they turn it off, because a lot of times people are sleeping or coming home from work. Like you said, if they're going through a detour situation, they're not gonna be matching up anyway. So a lot of times, as a proactive person that rides transit a lot at night, if I'm going to a new area or an area that I'm not particularly fond of or that I frequent a lot, I will tell my driver where I'm gonna get off and where I expect him to get me off at. And if he forgets, then we'll talk about it together. But I mean, generally, I will tell you, during the day, some daytime drivers are not as friendly. They expect their GPS, they expect their equipment to work as it does, right? So then they don't want to interact with the customer as much. So I think a lot of that is just maybe a customer training, understanding that at night or at different times of the day, certain customers have their needs are a little bit more elevated. And so also, if you cut back on some of your messages, or actually, one of the other things I was gonna say as a caveat to this, who determines what messages get put on the system and when they get prompted to play or not? Because like the messages on the train are very different than the messages on the mainline system. Oh, yeah. And so who determines when that prompt gets pushed? And how long does that prompt stay there? And like in Las Vegas, for instance, they make announcements. They say priority seating for women and children, or pregnant women and children, right? In the accessible seating, right? We don't say that on our buses for our priority seating, but when do we get to say that? When do we get to say that priority seating is for those that it's designed to be for, and you can give those up if you're asked to do so? Because they use those announcements all over the country in other ways. So I'm not saying that we should get our priority seating and that should be the announcement on the bus. But what I am saying is, like, when we give free rides during March 17th, during St. Patty's Day, for people that want to go out and celebrate, and we don't want them drinking and driving, right? We give free rides on our transit system. When do we get to play that announcement so that it actually preps people to start being sober before the day of and not hours before they decide they want to go home? You know, we prep them a week or two ahead of time. Hey, we're giving you a free ride to the bar. Come use our system. You know, St. Patty's Day, free rides. You know, so who determines what messages are played, when they're played, how often they're played, and what areas they get played in? How often does that get looked at? How often does that get manipulated? How often can I influence that to play a different type of message? Like the Vikings game is playing in town today. You can take Metro Transit to the stadium. I'm not saying we should do that, right? Because then we have all these sports teams, and that's more than 100,000 messages, right? Because then you're going to put the sports messages on there. But what I'm saying is, when do we determine what messages are valuable and what messages are invaluable? Because drinking and driving and free rides from the bar is a valuable message and should be clearly understood. And maybe free rides to the football stadium is not our biggest high priority.
So do you want more or less?
So is there a way we could do less, but we could prioritize the type of messaging that is out there and the time of day it's played?
Thank you for that comment, Mr. Chair and committee members. The onboard stop announcements and the extra kind of informational announcements that you mentioned are held in kind of two different systems. One is automated and determined when they play by GPS location.
Yep.
And as well, the stop information is largely determined by ADA regulations, where we have to announce major intersections, different landmarks, and as well, there has to be an announcement every so often, depending on distance from the most recent announcement. So that's why sometimes when a bus is for example, crossing the Mississippi River, if there's no stops in the middle of the river, they'll have gone a certain distance where it necessitates an announcement, and that's why we'll, I think in that situation, announce Mississippi River as a sort of landmark of where you currently are. As for the extra, we call them canned announcements.
If I can stop you
Yeah.
there. So the announcement for the high priority spot like the Mississippi River, that sits in your system in a couple different spots then, right? It sits in there as a landmark, right? And then it also sits in there as a distance spot, right? So that's why you get the repeated messages multiple times. If that didn't sit in those multiple categories, it wouldn't play as often, correct? Let's just play that out a little bit.
So I'll try not to overstep the technical stuff is not my thing, so I'll do the best I can.
It's not mine either.
So basically the way that bus data exists is in patterns. So routes can have many patterns depending on branches, times of day, when there's a layover. And so announcements are attached to that pattern. So that's why our system is not nimble enough to go back to say you're gonna to have patterns overlap, if that makes sense. There sort of has to be data associated with each pattern.
I know what you're saying.
I think I know what I'm saying, but I don't know.
It has to stay in the pattern that it's designated for. It cannot go back and overlap the pattern without going back through the designation, correct? Something like that?
Sort of, or every trip that a driver is taking, that their work has just a set of, that's kind of the base unit we're talking about. So if we had a more nimble system, we would love that. It would require less data to download. It would go faster. Sure. It just isn't. Yeah. And then I got the sense from the comments you were making about marketing messages that you're thinking specifically about light rail.
No, I said the messages are very different on light rail than they are on the mainline system.
Yes, correct.
And they are very intentional messaging on light rail versus on the mainline system. And what I'm saying is if we can intentionally target on the light rail system, aren't we using that same type of data system on our mainline system? Or is it a little older or different?
The light rail system is different.
So it's a newer system, right?
Not just a newer system, but a different system that's more connected with,
Gotcha, it's more connected with GPS and all the technical sides of.
Basically the tracks, the SCADA, the things that are running the train are very different than the things that run the buses.
Gotcha.
Please don't ask me to elaborate.
No, I won't. Well, I'll be nice to you. I'm almost done here, so, okay.
No, that's a good question.
I do have one additional follow-up, if that's all
Sure.
right, to say.
Please.
That is one of the things we would love your feedback on, is we sort of set up these special messages on the bus side. They haven't really been looked at because it's not, the highest priority is making sure just the announcements play. It's not, we haven't really thought about what is an important announcement, when should it play, what should be prioritized. And that is why we want this ongoing engagement, because there are trade-offs to a lot of decisions and we want community feedback on that.
I don't tell people what my disabilities are a lot of times, but I will tell you, I rely heavily on those voice automated announcements. Whether I like them or not is another story. But I rely on them a lot to get to where I need to be, especially in the evening time or when it's dark out. And because we're dark about 4:30 for about 6 months out of the year, they're very important. However, I think you should have less of them, and I think you should prioritize which ones come to the top.
Thank you. Andy has a comment, and we have to move on, Heidi. I am sorry. Go ahead, Andy.
Hi, thanks. I was asked by United Blind to bring this forward when they saw you were going to be presenting here today. And I was pleased that I saw a reference to it already, but the issue with announcements being interrupted by the stop requested notification, is it possible to queue stop requested on the current system so that it doesn't play till after the locational announcement is played? And if not, can we specifically reach out in the training to ATU folks to make sure that operators know, especially when, you know, an announcement's interrupted, make sure and call that out verbally?
Good point.
But that's, you can't do that on a train when it happens.
Yeah, they can yell at you on the speaker all day long.
Just say,
let's let
Mr.
them
Chair,
answer.
members,
Go ahead.
that is a really challenging question. It seems very simple. We knew that was going to be a topic of conversation. There are pretty significant safety concerns, not insurmountable, but if the driver only has so much time to stop. And so if that stop requested is programmed to be first priority, that is the way the system is programmed. We believe it could be deprioritized to go play after announcements, maybe. But that does shorten the amount of reaction time the operator has to stop at a stop. And without us knowing that those announcements are happening in the right place, we might be causing a safety concern or passing stops. So it seems very simple, and I thought it was very simple, but I think there's a lot of stakeholders on the operational side and on the customer side that we have to come to some sort of consensus on what the best idea is there.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Andy, for bringing that up, and I will make sure that I'll talk to David afterwards, and we'll look at seeing if there's a way that we could do that, because I do think the message being interrupted during a stop that's been pulled, I think that proposes two issues, right? It proposes the safety issue for the driver, because the driver can't stop in time, right? But it also provides a safety issue for that person that's trying to get off the bus. Because if that bus is a frequency bus, that bus is not gonna stop every 2 blocks. That bus is gonna stop every 4 blocks.
Yeah.
So that means that person that needed to get off, that you didn't hear the message for, or that you knew that you didn't know that person needed to get off, then that person's gotta walk back 2 additional blocks, plus the 2 blocks that he is gonna have to walk back because he originally wanted to get off on the stop that he would have gotten off on if the driver would have known that he wanted to get off.
And if you're on a train, it's kind of hard to do that sometimes.
All right. Thank you both very much for coming. This was extremely informative, and we're glad that Metro Transit's focusing in on this. All right. So we have actually, let's take care of our agenda and minutes. We do have a quorum. I would entertain a motion to
Do we still
adopt.
have all the people on the screen?
What's that?
Do we still have all the right people on the screen?
Yes, we have, Sam is online, and we have, I think, 9 in the room.
Yeah, we have enough.
I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda that we are 2/3 of the way through.
So moved.
So we're doing really well.
Second, all right, any discussion? All in favor, aye, opposed, no?
Aye.
Fantastic, thank you. I would also, thank you, Sam. I would also entertain a motion to approve last month's minutes.
I will make a motion to approve with the understanding that our new secretary does such a thorough job of that. I have to read them over a couple different times to make sure that she's doing such a good job. And I just wanted to make sure that you know that, because I know a lot of times our committee members, we just say, yeah, thanks for the notes, you're doing a great job. But we're getting actually the information that we're actually requesting, and we're getting it in a easable use that we can look at. So, I mean, I appreciate you being due diligent, and I see the work that you do behind the scenes with getting it together. So even though I don't respond to that, I do see it, so thank you.
Yes, we can never thank support staff enough. Never. So we have we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Patsy will second it.
All right. Patsy can have the second. Or is there any discussion? All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Abstentions? Fantastic, thank you. All right, on to rethinking I-94, our last minute agenda change. But I think this is an important topic and fun, and
And then I have an update for the
sounds good.
line.
Sounds good. So we have, I think it's Alyssa,
On the screen.
Melissa, Alyssa, and Renee, I think, or at least two of you are here. Thank you for joining us online. It's nice to have some folks from MnDOT come and talk to us every once in a while, but this is very Metro focused, so we appreciate you coming to talk to us about the Rethinking 94 long-term plan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. One moment while I set my screen up here. So yeah, I'm Melissa Barnes. I'm the Rethinking I-94 Project Director, and Renee would have been here today, but unfortunately she's unexpectedly out. And so we have Alyssa Cruzel, who's also part of the Rethinking I-94 team, and MnDOT Metro's communications team as well. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I really want to say thank you for having us here today. We really appreciate the chance to present. I really want to highlight what we're going to go over today: some project location, the purpose and goals, the schedule overview, alternatives. Alyssa will give us an update on public engagement, as well as the Rethinking I-94 Community Leaders Group. But today, the information we're going to share is going to be really high level. We'll share an overall purpose and goals, the 10 alternatives we have, and where we'd like to invite a member or two from this committee to possibly participate on our community leaders group. Right now, we're not necessarily collecting input or feedback on anything specific, but we really are here to raise awareness that the process is taking place. You'll see later on from our schedule that it is a long-term process, and we need consistent input and feedback to be successful. We want to open the door to this committee to provide meaningful input as we move forward. In the summer of 2024, we'll be having a formal public comment period, along with more information coming out regarding the alternatives that we'll present today. We'd like to come back to this group at key points in the process to get that specific feedback. We do want to understand your needs for the project as we move forward, and understanding that your perspectives and needs as people with disabilities are unique and integral to this process, whether that be as pedestrians, transit users, vision or hearing impairments, having physical disability or cognitive disabilities, visible or not. We want your voices at the table. So again, we really appreciate the opportunity to open the door and raise the awareness of this process, so we can continue to keep you informed as more details become available. And when we are at the point of collecting more input, you have that foundational knowledge to have an informed opinion. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of the project location. We are on I-94 between the two downtowns. So from Minneapolis, we're at the 35W Hiawatha interchange on the west, going all the way 7.5 miles to the east. 94 at Marion Street in St. Paul is the limits of our project. We also bring in about a 1/4 mile north and south of the highway. So we do take in the frontage roads and other things. So we'll be studying more and kind of covering a little bit of the local system as well. We know that 94 runs in front of people's doorways, and it also runs from coast to coast. So it is both hyperlocal as well as a really important connection for a much broader purpose. So the freeway, we know, impacts people's lives on a daily basis, from needing to cross the freeway as a pedestrian or carry freight across the country. Next slide, please. So we went and developed a purpose of the project as part of our original outreach. I think it's worth reading this purpose because it is The reason that we're here and and what projects that will be selected will accomplish. So projects within the Rethinking I-94 program will accomplish the following: improve mobility for people and goods on, along, and across the corridor in a way that facilitates community connections for all modes. Enhance safety for people and goods on, along, and across the I-94 corridor for all modes. Address aging infrastructure condition within the 94 corridor, and support transportation objectives consistent with adopted state and regional or Met Council plans. Next slide, please. As we talk to people about the transportation system and what was important to them in their lives, we really heard that things that were important were beyond just simple transportation, right? Which we know. The livability framework is what they're calling it, was created. So we incorporated the things that we heard were important as part of the goals of the project. These items will be evaluated right next to all the other items that we typically evaluate, like traffic speeds and how many people are making it along 94 per day and how far apart the crossings are and how wide is the sidewalk, things like that. So we will be looking at community connections. Are the alternatives facilitating and helping connect the community? Public health and the environment. Economics, how will any alternative impact the economics of the area? A sense of place. Safety and beyond safety that we normally measure out of like a manual, but safety is how does it feel safe? And equity. Really, our projects are looking to develop and execute a community-based approach focused on reconnecting neighborhoods, revitalizing communities, and ensuring that residents have a meaningful voice in transportation decisions that affect their lives. Next slide, please. So I'll give you a little bit of context about where we are in the overall project schedule. This is a really busy slide, so I'm just going to take a second here to walk you through it. In 2015, the Rondo neighborhood of St. Paul, which is east of Dale Street, held a healing ceremony for when I-94 was installed, and really went down the center of their neighborhood, including taking out houses. And it was a thriving African-American neighborhood in the city of St. Paul. At that healing ceremony, our then Commissioner Charlie Zelli apologized for the harms that I-94 did when it was installed and the harms that the then Highway Department created, and promised to do better. So from 2016 to 2018, we just went out and listened to people. That's where the project goals were developed. That's where we heard about what was important beyond the transportation system. In 2018, we entered what we call phase 2, which is our environmental process. So we are in what's called an environmental impact statement as part of the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, which is the highest level of review through our partners at the Federal Highway Administration. We are in scoping right now, and that's going to be, we'll be in scoping probably through this summer or fall. And we've created our purpose and need. We've come up with ideas. We did a transit study in partnership with Metro Transit and Met Council, and put those together with highway ideas, and we've formed alternatives. That's where we are today. We're not in a formal comment period. We had recently released this summer the alternatives to the public. We've kind of wrapped up the outreach on that. We're working on evaluating the alternatives. We are creating a scoping decision document, is what that's called officially, and there will be a public comment period this summer on the scoping decision document with the alternatives that you'll see today evaluated. We'll finalize that scoping decision document in the probably late summer 2024. And then we enter what's called our Tier 1 phase. So that Tier 1 phase takes 3 years. So from 2024 to 2027, we're going to be working on getting much more detailed in our evaluation, We'll work on really rounding out these alternatives. You'll see today they are very high level. They're literally a cross section, and we need to get much more information. We'll end up with a preferred alternative at the end of 2027 that we can then move into creating plan sets. That's tier 2, way back up at the top, the third box, 2027 and beyond. More than likely, this will be multiple projects. That wouldn't be one big giant 7.5 mile project, but multiple construction projects that we could implement in phases. Construction at the earliest would be in 2028, and there is currently no funding for construction. However, we are committed to doing something. That's why we're here. One of the reasons there's no money for construction, we don't know how much this will cost. So any money that we put into our capital improvement plan would just be a guess. So we're kind of waiting to see what comes out of this process in order to fund something. Next slide, please. So I promise I'm going to show you the alternatives soon, but first, some considerations as we look at those alternatives. We are not yet at the point to look at intersection and interchange modifications. This process, you start from a very high level. So you start from the regional level, regional modeling, and you slowly get more detailed as you move through it. So you're going to see a very high level information. We know that likely these alternatives will vary along the corridor. We have a river crossing. We've got railroad crossings. We're in St. Paul. We're in Minneapolis. We know it's going to look different. And right now we'll just be looking at a cross section. MnDOT is committed to walking and biking improvements as part of all build alternatives. But the specific alternatives, what they are, how wide they are all going to be determined later on in the process. We've heard that aesthetics and streetscaping and landscaping are really important. Those as well will be determined later on in the process. And then if you've heard of the Reconnect Rondo Land Bridge, that is a kind of a small tunnel or cap or land bridge as it's called, over about 6 to 8 blocks in the Rondo neighborhood. That is being led by Reconnect Rondo. We respect the work that's been done to date by Reconnect Rondo and congratulate them on receiving those federal funds for further planning and environmental documentation activities. All of their efforts will be considered in decision-making process for the project alternatives, and we continue to coordinate and collaborate with Reconnect Rondo moving forward. Next slide. So this is the first of our 10 alternatives. This is actually 3 alternatives in one. These are our maintenance alternatives. So to remind folks, I-94 in this area, east of 280, is 3 lanes in each direction with a shoulder that can be used for transit advantages when the freeway starts to go less than 35 miles per hour. West of 280, there's 4 general purpose lanes and there is no transit shoulder. There's not a wide enough shoulder for buses to use. The transit shoulder was converted into a general purpose lane after the 35W bridge collapse and was never put back to a shoulder. So again, 4 lanes in each direction, west of 280, 3 east of 280. These general maintenance alternatives, we have a general maintenance A and a maintenance B, would really leave 94 as it is today. Maybe there would be some small improvements as able, but pretty much business as usual. Maintenance B is probably the biggest change. That would add back in that transit shoulder west of 280. All the other ones, transit would continue as it does today. Next slide. I'm not seeing the slide change. Did it change on your end?
No. It did.
Now it did.
There we go.
Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is our at grade A alternative. This concept would remove the freeway. Right now, I-94 is what's in what a lot of people call a trench, or it's under the at grade. So we would fill in the trench, bring in a bunch of dirt, fill it in. It would be at the same elevation as the street surrounding it. It would be a 2-lane road in each direction for general traffic, with a 2-way dedicated bus rapid transit lane down the middle. The intent would be that this would be a lower speed road. Think something like Snelling Avenue, like 30 miles an hour. This is not a Hiawatha. This would be a slower road with some sort of intersection, like traffic signals or roundabouts to be determined. The bus lanes, there would be 3 stops between downtown St. Paul and downtown Minneapolis. And it would not carry local service. It would only carry the express service from downtown St. Paul to downtown Minneapolis. More than likely, there'd probably be some areas where there'd still be bridges because we have a railroad crossing in this area. And in some places, it would just be really hard to make the grades work without taking out homes or having way too much impact to the surrounding community. So some of that's to be determined. But that is at grade A. Next slide, please. At grade B is very similar to at grade A. Same idea. Instead of the BRT lanes being between the general purpose lanes, they would be on the outside of the general purpose lanes. So this provides trade-offs such as different types of operations at the intersections. Sometimes you can make things operate better if the bus lanes or the priority lanes are on the outside. It also has trade-offs for people using transit. You're likely closer to, instead of being dropped in the center of the roadways, you're being dropped on the side of the roadways. So definitely different operational characteristics for either of these alternatives. Next slide, please. This is called our local regional roadway alternative. This one kind of takes the most explaining. In this alternative, there's a regional system, which would still be a freeway. So 2 general purpose lanes at freeway speeds, still down in that trench with buses on the shoulder. The buses would probably have that 0, 1, or 3 stops, kind of depending on what comes out in next steps. And the regional system, that freeway system, would only have 1 or maybe 2 interchanges between downtown St. Paul and Minneapolis. So all the other traffic that wanted to use the local system, so if you wanted to go to Dale or Creighton Vandalia, you'd be getting off of the freeway either at the ends of the freeway or at that one of those middle stops. Next slide, please. This is our first, our reduced freeway alternative. We call it reduced freeway A. This concept would involve rebuilding the existing freeway. There'd be 2 general purpose lanes in each direction along the entirety of the 7.5 miles, along with a single, or in each direction, there would be a managed lane. So a managed lane is bus rapid transit, easy pass for those willing to pay, or HOV. Transit would ride down that center lane with bus stops kind of that end up in the middle of the bridge is where you would access them, and then you'd get down to freeway elevation to access those bus stops. Next slide, please. Reconfigure Freeway A. There, for reduced Freeway A, there were 2 general purpose lanes in each direction with a managed lane. For Reconfigure Freeway A, there are 3 general purpose lanes in each direction with a managed lane. So in some areas, this actually makes the capacity of the freeway smaller, and in some it expands it. So that's why we call it Reconfigure Freeway A. Oh. Next slide, please. Expanded Freeway A, this alternative allows the lanes on 94 still to vary. So there'd still be 3 or 4 general purpose lanes in each direction like there is today. and it simply adds a general purpose, or I'm sorry, an HOV lane, that managed lane in each direction. This is the alternative that is in Met Council's regional plan, so we're required to evaluate it because it's already been through an outreach process. But it does not mean it's a chosen alternative, just one of the ones that we're evaluating. Next slide, please. Expanded Freeway B. This concept involves rebuilding the freeway and having 5 general purpose lanes in each direction with the buses on the shoulder, not in a managed lane. So this is probably the widest of all of our alternatives. And that wraps it up for the alternatives. If you could go to the next slide, Alyssa, we'll talk to you a little bit about our outreach.
Yes. All right. Thanks, Melissa. I'm also going to take a minute here to get my my screen situated. So as Melissa mentioned, earlier this summer, we released the 10 alternatives that she just got done walking through. And we did a wide variety of communications and engagement tools and tactics since that release in July to get out to the public to inform them about the alternatives, to educate them about the alternatives as well as where we're at in the process, as well as get start to get some feedback on the alternatives, what people liked, what people didn't like, what was potentially missing. So I'm going to briefly walk through some of the various tools and tactics that we did over the summer for public engagement. At MnDOT, it's really important that we're meeting people where they're at. So we went to a wide variety of community events and festivals this summer and fall. On the screen here, there's a list of all the things that we went to. We were very intentional around making sure that we are hitting up neighborhood events, cultural events, trying to be as in community as much as possible. So I'm just going to highlight some of the ones that we attended. Little Africa Fest in the Hamlin Midway neighborhood. We did some partnering with the Keystone Foodmobile. We went with them to some of their drop-off locations to get some feedback from folks. We went to Open Street Cedar Riverside. We did some events in downtown Minneapolis, the Black Market, Nicollet Exchange. We went to St. Paul Community College's Back to School Community Resource Fair. So spoke with students who are coming back to school as well as staff and faculty. Went to a bunch of St. Paul Community Council summer and fall festivals. So Mac Grove Fest, Union Park Ice Cream Social. Went to the Chromosome Mural and Arts Festival in St. Anthony Park. We spent a Saturday tabling at the Mungtown Marketplace in October. That was very fruitful. We got a lot of feedback from a lot of folks, as well as we hosted 2 in-person open houses, one in August at Elliott Park in Minneapolis, and then one at the Rondo Library in St. Paul in September. Those open house meetings, they were throughout the day. We had kind of scheduled time blocks throughout the day for folks to stop by. So we had one in the morning to get the folks going to work. We had one over the mid-morning through the lunch hour, as well as in the evening as well. So next slide, please. We also, very much like the presentation that we're doing for you today, we went out and did a bunch of presentation for community-based organizations, agencies. Once again, there's a very long list here on all of the places that we've been since this summer. So a lot of Minneapolis and St. Paul Community Council meetings. A lot of them have transportation or land use committees, so we would be at those. So I'm just going to highlight once again some of the ones on the presentation slide here. So Mac Grove Community Council, Hamlin Midway Coalition, went to a couple events with the Reconnect Rondo organization. We hosted 2 virtual open houses ourselves in August. St. Anthony Park Community Council. We went to the Advocacy Council for Tribal Transportation, the Minnesota Freight Advisory Committee, Union Park District Council, St. Paul Climate Justice Board, went to the Augsburg University's President Leadership Team meeting, also hosted a presentation for the Minnesota Council on Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. We've been hosting a lot of things with Chambers of Commerce, so hosted a couple of MnDOT hosted presentations. We also did something with the Minnesota Chamber just a couple of weeks ago. Regional Council of Mayors, we had a presentation with them, I believe it was 2 weeks ago. So just really trying to meet agencies and organizations where they're at so that they can be informed around what's going on, so they can share information with their membership. Next slide, please.
This is David. Just want to jump in and give you the 10, 12-minute mark, okay?
Great. Yeah, thanks, David. We're almost done. Just a few more slides here.
Perfect.
We also have upcoming presentations as well. Tonight, Melissa and I are actually going to be at the St. Paul Youth Commission presentation. They have a monthly meeting, so we're going to be there. In January, we're going to go to the Minneapolis Youth Congress and give a very similar presentation there. And then also in January, we're going to be at the Metropolitan Urban Indian Directors meeting as well. So we're still getting out there, informing people and involving them in the process. So next slide, please. Another tool that we used throughout our engagement phase was a public survey. The survey was open from the middle of July when we released the alternatives till the end of October. We received over 3,200 responses, and the majority of the responses that we heard from were folks who were highly educated. We heard from more folks who identified as male. The age that we primarily heard from were mid-20s to mid-40s. The race that folks identified themselves as were primarily white, and then also English was the primary language that folks spoke. It's not on this slide, and that's an oversight on our part, but we also, the folks that responded very overwhelmingly did not self-identify as having a disability. So definitely missing that voice in the survey feedback as well. So all the feedback that we got through the survey, as well as in the conversations that we had at presentations or the conversations that we had at events conducting outreach, all of that is being summarized in a public engagement summary, which we're hoping to share later this winter. We're bringing everything together, what we heard, high level, tracking, and how many folks we spoke to, who the folks are we hearing from, and we'll have that engagement report hopefully this winter. So next slide. I'm briefly at a very high level going to talk through some of the comments and themes that we heard through the survey. In terms of support, all of the options that Melissa walked through earlier, every option, folks like them for different reasons, and they have concerns or questions for the various options as well. So there's a lot of support for the various options. There's a lot that folks still want to know in terms of the evaluation and what these alternatives look like in more detail. There's a lot of folks who have also expressed interest in rail alternatives, so light rail, high speed, heavy rail. There's also a lot of folks who are interested in land bridges, both the initiative that's coming out of the Reconnect Rondo, as well as land bridges in general. Folks are also interested in stitches, caps, and tunnels, or just an overall theme of how do we connect communities together throughout this process. And folks are wanting more details around the impacts of the alternatives, so traffic flow, air quality, noise, how much things are going to cost, which Melissa mentioned are things that we're all working through as we're evaluating the alternatives throughout this next phase here. So next slide. Melissa mentioned earlier that our engagement is kind of winding down right now, but for us as an agency, as MnDOT, it's really important for us that we're continuing to build long-term relationships and continuing to build opportunities for engagement with communities. So one of the things that we're going to be launching here in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, is a Community Voices initiative. So this initiative is really focused on continuing to get feedback from community. We're really looking for folks with a wide variety of diverse experiences connected to the I-94 corridor to share their stories and to share their experiences with us, as that's going to be really helpful for the project team as we continue to move through the alternatives evaluation to see how these alternatives are going to be impacting community members' everyday lives as they live, work, and play in the I-94 corridor area. So We will have information coming out about community voices through our Gov delivery email announcements on social media and on our website in the weeks to come. If this is an initiative that you're interested in yourself sharing your story as it relates to I-94 or know other people in the community who have unique and compelling stories to share about the corridor, the best way to stay in touch and learn more about that is to sign up for email updates on our website. We have a link as well as a QR code on the screen here. We're really looking forward to this opportunity as just a more unique way to have stories connected to the project area and using storytelling to see how our project is going to impact the community. So next slide, please. The last thing that we really want to touch on and the thing that we have as an ask of this group is one of the other tools and tactics that we're using for community engagement is we have a community leaders group. So it's kind of like an advisory group with community-based organizations and agency leaders between MnDOT and the community. So the purpose of the group is really to identify opportunities for information sharing and two-way communication and serving as an information resource between MnDOT and the community at large. Just knowing that this project's area is so big, it just really helps us get more deeper into community and hearing from more voices. So the goals is to ensure a diverse set of community voices are at the table and diverse stakeholders with diverse interests, and providing information back to MnDOT regarding what community members are experiencing and the issues that are kind of discussed in community on a regular basis. So next slide here. Over the last couple of months, we have been very focused on diversifying and expanding the representation that we have on the community leaders group, and really been thinking, what community groups, what perspectives are really missing from the group. So that's one of the asks that we're asking of this group here today. We don't have a lot of community voice or community representation from individuals that are connected and associated with the disability community. We got one person on board a couple of weeks ago, but we're really looking to expand the amount of folks who are connected to the disability community on the community leaders group, because that is a perspective that we're missing. And as Melissa mentioned before, it's really important for us to have that voice at the table when we are making decisions as it relates to this project. We're not just focused on whether or not our designs are compliant, but really making sure that these designs are reflected upon by members of the disability community. It's really important that we have an inclusive process and an accessible process, and so we're looking to really expand community leaders. So some of the activities or kind of expectations of a community leader are attending quarterly meetings. We're looking to have the next meeting in early 2024, and kind of throughout the meetings where we ask community leaders to kind of help us with outreach and engagement kind of throughout the process. So a lot of the presentations and community events that we went to this year, we worked with community leaders to be present at those events. Another kind of activity or expectation is to provide insight based off of the strategies that we use, the communication tactics that we use to really make sure that we are reaching as many people as we can. As well as another task or role is to help engage the community members and stakeholders that you have connections to, especially those that are not currently engaged in the project but should be. And really, once again, being that one-way communication or that two-way communication between MnDOT and the community. So reporting what you're hearing on the ground and sharing that with MnDOT, as well as providing current updates on the project as well. So if folks are interested in the community leaders group, you can definitely reach out to Melissa or I, or work with David to get connected as well. I know David's been working with us very intentionally to get some folks from the disability community on the group. There will be a short application that needs to be filled out, and then we will kind of have an introductory onboarding conversation with you to get you up to speed, talk through any questions or concerns that you have. And if you aren't interested in being a community leader but know another member in the community that you think would be a good fit for this process, please let them know, and please tell them to get a hold of us. We're definitely, like I mentioned, we're definitely looking to expand our community leaders group, so it's a more representative group of who live, work, and play in the I-94 area. So next slide here. All right, this actually is the last piece of information before we open it up for questions. We do have a project website, like I mentioned before. The link as well as a QR code is on the next slide here. But the website has been serving as a base or a hub for all of the project information. So there's a lot of history around the first phases of the project, where we are currently at with the alternatives, as well as any upcoming community engagement opportunities that come up. That's where we hosted our survey. This summer, there'll be information about community voices there shortly once we have that ready to go. And of course, that's where you can sign up for project emails as well. So head to the website to learn the latest updates on the project. So that's where we are with engagement. So I'll turn it back over, I believe, for closing slide, and if there's questions or comments.
Thank you both very much. So given our time constraints and also the long-term plan that this is, I want to focus questions and comments on the community, what are you calling it? The community engagement group, or what's it called again? Sorry.
Leaders role.
Community leaders. Yes. So I think, do you want individuals that obviously have disabilities, but do you want organizational representation as well? And from what I understand,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for us, it's really important that folks are connected to an agency or a community-based organization. That way that they can really help spread awareness about the community leaders to a broader community base or a larger membership base. So it's really important that folks are connected to some sort of agency. It doesn't necessarily have to be this group. I don't know if folks on this committee are volunteering for other community-based organizations, but definitely looking for an agency representation.
We do have quite a few of our agency representations here on this committee. There is a time commitment too. I mean, obviously, if somebody shows up for this, it's not, hours a week, but I think quarterly or meetings, there's information to digest in between those meetings, given that it's a really, really, really big project that I think has the potential to make our city more accessible. I mean, anytime you cut a huge gap down the middle of something, it's less accessible. So questions focusing on just the group that you're putting together, I think, in 2024. So right. Darrell, and then Heidi.
So as far as the group, the makeup of the group, the equity piece of the group, folks with disabilities, folks of people of color, folks of elderly or have an older status that use this corridor as well. I mean, how do you have identifying markers within the application process of what those priorities are, and how many people are you looking for? I mean, each one of us represents a number of organizations or a number of groups of people here at the table. And if we're not representing any organization, we're representing our district within the Met Council. So we are representing of potentially thousands and tens of thousands of people. And I-94 is a big project. It's a project that has been needed for at least the last 2 decades that I'm aware of. And I'm not a driver, so I hear this from my drivers that drive me, and I hear this from talented folks that drive the system and drive 94. So I commend you guys for taking this project on, but how do we assure ourselves if our voice is really valuable, and if it's going to provide some equity piece to this project, then how can you assure us of that? Is there a particular number, a percentage of seats on that committee that you're going to assure are given to folks with disabilities or folks that represent organizations, with folks that use the corridor or the system? Because if we just give you one or two.
Yeah, great.
If we just give you one or two people, how are we assured that those one or two people are gonna get their voice heard? So what is it what numbers are you looking for the committee?
So we're gonna just.
Yeah, thanks for the question there. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we're at 2:30, which is
Sorry.
fine. We can take a few extra minutes here. I'm okay with it if committee members have to leave
Well,
or
we
if
have to ask our
if
tech people
staff
to.
has to leave. Yeah, if staff have to leave, by all means. But I think like 2 minutes, can you answer that question? Because I think it's a good one, like the percentage of folks, representing underrepresented communities.
Yeah, great question. So we don't have a set amount of seats for the community leaders group. I think we have anywhere between 30 and 40 community-based organizations that are a part of the group. So it's not like it's a set number of seats that are available. We're definitely looking to expand the group as much as we can. In terms of representation, like I said, we only have one person connected to a disability organization right now. So we would definitely like to grow that. We do understand that it's a time commitment. I would like to see 2 to 4 people within the next couple of weeks or months join the community advisory group that represent the disability community, just so we can continue to kind of expand the voices that we have at the table. So definitely looking to expand. Melissa, any additional feedback?
Yeah, I mean, we are looking for holistic feedback from many people. We have a community leaders, as you're right, it's not we're not getting an exact percentage or exact numbers, but it is a connection point to get our voices out to different stakeholders and community groups where we can, but we're also doing holistic engagement. Those surveys, we're trying to target a much broader area. When we come out to other types of events, we're trying to target much broader areas. So also happy to take feedback on other ways that we best engage more communities and the disability community as a whole.
Thank you. So before we conclude, and I think we can take, and I can maybe facilitate the offline discussion in terms of disability representation on this community leaders group. But so I understand there's a geographical requirement or desire, to live within a certain a geographical area of the project. Is that true?
Go ahead, Shake.
Not necessarily live, but be an agency that serves people within the project area.
Awesome. Thank you. That makes very much sense. All right, Heidi, you
My
got take it away,
question is
Heidi.
quick. I just want to say this was a good presentation, if I'm saying that right. A good, put together thing, because in the beginning, it was really good seeing all the different maps, and trying to understand what you're saying. So I thought this was really well done.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. We'll take it offline. I'll continue to work with you and the TAAC members to get hopefully up to 4 folks represented. Thank you both very much. All right, real
Thank you
quickly.
so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes. Darrell, did you have an update that you wanted to
I
give?
just wanted to say, I'm sorry I missed all you guys at the very cold day. We opened the bridge. I'm not a good driver. I don't drive. But we opened a bridge. Was it 494? It's called the Bill Burlington Bridge. I can't pronounce that bridge. It starts with a B. We just opened it, Monday? It was a Monday morning at roughly about 11 o'clock in the morning. And it was very cold, but it was well attended. The bridge is open. It's in connection of the Gold Line. So that is one of my committee reports. I was there, it was very cold. And the Purple Line, we meet the CBAC committee for the Purple Line meets tomorrow. As I was just informed, I had another meeting before I got here, so.
Thank you, Darrell. Are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment?
Yeah.
We'll wait for member comment. So no members of the public. Are there any members who'd like to make a comment? Heidi, go ahead.
Recently, I was coming back from the Mall of America, and I don't know if I mentioned this a couple months ago. And we knew at the Mall of America, at the bus station, the 54 coming back to St. Paul had some smoke coming out of the back of the bus, and then when we were almost into St. Paul, we had to get onto another bus because it decided to send a really bad noise, like a beeping sound. So I just, and the bus driver did a really good job and decided to call in, and we got another bus to finish the route because it was to the point where the bus was starting to show some scariness.
Thank you. Thank you, Heidi.
So I was really impressed with our bus driver and how he handled it.
Always good to have compliments. Andy, take us home.
Just one quick informational tidbit on Metro Mobility. We have started, thankfully, based on a seed that I think Ken Rodgers years ago suggested, we've started proactively reimbursing fares based on go-to card charges. So if you paid with a go-to card and you were either picked up outside the window, we're in a free fare corridor based on Metro Transit trips, or we're on the bus over maximum onboard time. Is that no, I got it wrong. It's appointment time, not maximum onboard time, because we don't have the max OBT in all of our contracts. So if we blew your appointment time, blew your pickup time, or picked you up along a free fare corridor and collected a fare on go-to, we are automatically reimbursing the fare monthly back onto your go-to card.
Do I have to call in because I'm through Human Services?
Don't have to call in, but if you paid with cash or if we blew your max OBT, you should still call in. Otherwise, we're doing it automatically on a monthly basis.
When is that going to start? Because I remember years ago when we started the Go Card, the reimbursement, they said it was always done like that. If it was a fare that they charged, they'll reimburse you back. And it sounds like you guys are just starting to do that now.
Yeah, we have always been willing to reimburse, but it has required customer initiation of that transaction. The thing that has changed now
It
is
doesn't
that,
require the customer.
right, you don't have to ask anymore. We're automatically doing it,
Right.
and that has started now.
If folks have more questions about this particular topic, please, we can take it offline. Thank you all very much. We are adjourned. Thank you, staff, for sticking with us for 7 extra minutes. Enjoy your Wednesday, folks. Oh, and we are meeting in January.
Thank you.